Only 2 more days until Arsenal take on PSG in the Champions League semi-final second leg. We've got transfer news to discuss and a roundup of the weekend's Premier League action, which has more relevance to Arsenal these days, certainly, than it should have. This is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you've had a fantastic weekend. I hope you've been able to enjoy yourself regardless of the football. Life goes beyond just 22 men on a pitch kicking the ball around. So hopefully, indeed, you've had a decent weekend and you've been able to put that result to one side. But thank you so much, as always, for all of you for listening, for tuning in. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you to you all for tuning in. Let's make sure you drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. But I think we shouldn't waste any more time. Let's jump into the chat and say hello, first of all. Paul, Matt G, Stevie, Barry, good morning to you, and Oliver, Ashley. We've got Blackshine and Paul, Arasilki and Zoom. We've got Shari and Mike and Maximius and David. We've got Evan, Carrie Ann, Franklin. Thank you to you all and everybody else and for listening. It is indeed fantastic to have you all here. Let's, though, go to today's stories. And we start with a roundup of the weekend's Premier League action and, of course, what it therefore means for the Premier League and where Arsenal sit and how their Champions League qualification hopes are stacking up. Well, Sunday's games were rather interesting. We saw Chelsea get a big win for them over Liverpool. A Liverpool side, of course, seemingly checked out. Only, of course, I think to come back and play very well against Arsenal next week. We could all see that happening, can't we? Gift Chelsea 3 points and then, of course, play their hearts and skins out against Arsenal at Anfield. We will wait and see. West Ham drawing 1-1 with Tottenham. It's just the battle of teams down in the 15th, 16th and 17th places. Speaking of which, Brentford beating Manchester United 4-3. Really important win for Brentford and another damning result for Man United, another defeat for them. And then the more interesting result of the weekend, Brighton winning 1-0 right until the end. Newcastle, Alexander Isak equalising the 89th minute for a 1-1 draw. And that's a significant draw, of course, for Newcastle and, of course, for Arsenal, because what it means, as you can see on your screen for the table, is it is as follows. Arsenal, having played 35 games on 67 points, 3 points clear of Manchester City on 64 points. But importantly, 4 points clear of Newcastle now on 35 games played. It means that they have to, Newcastle, even with a win over Arsenal, should indeed Arsenal get and keep that gap until the point that they play each other. If Newcastle indeed fail to win their next game, Arsenal would only need 3 points to finish above Newcastle if they were to beat them. Well, actually, no. If Newcastle failed to win their next game and they beat Newcastle, it's game over. So Arsenal can confirm qualification if indeed they do manage to beat Newcastle when they face them in the next game. That would confirm qualification after that result. So worth pointing that out. Chelsea have moved on to 63 points as well after they beat Liverpool. Nottingham Forest play today away at Palace. They are on 60 points right now. Should Nottingham Forest lose to Crystal Palace, which could happen, it is at Palace, then Arsenal would only need a win over Southampton on the last day to confirm. In fact, they'd only need a win over any of their 3 games or a draw in each to confirm qualification for next season's Champions League. So it's all still to play for, all still going on. Aston Villa, of course, on 60 points themselves in 7th place. It's still looking very good for Arsenal. I know that yesterday, or rather Saturday's result, was one which did raise up concerns about whether Arsenal would finish top 5, but it's looking unlikely that Arsenal would, in the end, mess this up. Who knows? Touch wood, it's all going to be okay. But it might not be second place, but I think at this point in time, the way our form's been, we're just taking Champions League qualification at this stage, please. Moving forwards, though, and into our transfer news for today, Arsenal have been linked with a move for Real Madrid forward Rodrygo. A €100 million price tag is what has been quoted, though, for the Brazilian international. Said to be a player that Arsenal are keen on. And, of course, with his situation at Real Madrid, with Rodrygo coming through, with ambitions always for Real Madrid to sign players, Arsenal would make a fair destination. Of course, you guys in the chat box have always been telling me how much that he can indeed play on the left, even though he majority plays his games on the right for Real Madrid. And so therefore it would fit in that left-hand side with Arsenal. For me, though, that 100 million euro price tag is far, far, far too high. Far, far, far too high to consider a move for Rodrygo, sadly. You know, when you think about the likes of Nico Williams are available for around £50 million, that does make it so much more worth the money than somebody like Rodrygo for 100 million euros. So, yeah, it's just not a feasible deal for me. I just can't see how Arsenal would ever justify paying that. If it was 50 to 60 million pounds, then sure. But 100 million euros is a ridiculous amount of money for them to ask for Rodrygo. And sticking with Real Madrid, of course, Willam Saliba. His future remains very much a point of contention. However, according to L'Equipe in France, the Frenchman is not considered to be pushing for an exit from Arsenal. He is happy at the club. Certainly, I've asked him myself about his future, about his situation, about his confidence, the way in which he wants to kind of stay. And he said he's happy. He wants to win things here. However, that report in L'Equipe does suggest that he does want some guarantees that Arsenal is the right place for him to win trophies. That, of course, comes with the idea of transfers, the idea that Arsenal will strengthen, the idea that Arsenal will continue to add quality players and that will make them more competitive and more likely to win big things. Now, being in the Champions League semi-final is, of course, a big achievement and certainly does go some way to showing the competitive nature of this team, even without all of the players that we have been missing this season, and of course, the situations that we've gone through. But, of course, we want to be lifting that silverware, not just getting to those latter stages of the competition. So it is positive, this story around Saliba, but it's also demanding. And Arsenal have to deliver. We've talked about this a lot. We've talked about this in detail. Arsenal absolutely have to go into this upcoming summer transfer window and have a 10 out of 10 window. 8 doesn't cut it for me. We need a 10 out of 10 window. You have me on record. We need a perfect summer transfer window for me to have, to justify our spending. It has to be a 10 out of 10 window. That will be within the context of what we can spend, but we need to have as good of a window as is possible in the summer. And that's absolutely fair enough for Saliba to ask for those guarantees. You know, that he wants to be somewhere he's going to win. He wants to be somewhere he knows he's going to be getting, you know, the best possible talent to help him do such a thing with Arsenal. And so let's wait and see what happens. Well, let's go to part 2. Some of your questions and more in the next 20 minutes or so, right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of today's show, where we're going to be tackling some of your questions, some of your thoughts and feelings, and more, of course, as well in the chat box. So if you've got a question that you'd like to throw into the chat, it is now the time to do so. So get them in there as and when you can. Let's scroll up in the chat, because I imagine we will indeed be tackling quite a few. Claire says, with other options available other than Rodrygo at that price, it makes no sense at all. It does tend to be the case. Chris says, we've been awful. If we don't finish second, there's going to be a lot of anger. People paying a lot of money for their tickets. The players need to sort their form out. I think there will be a lot of anger if Arsenal don't finish in the top 5. I don't think there'll be necessarily loads of anger if we finish, say, 3rd. I can't see it being. It'll be disappointing, but I just don't think so. It's been ridiculous, as I've pointed out a number of times, that we are even still second in the league based upon what we've had to deal with this season anyway. But the fact, if Arsenal, it doesn't matter what we do in the league if we win the Champions League, of course, but that is, at this moment in time, the less likely scenario because of that defeat to PSG in the first leg. But who knows? Anything's possible in the Champions League, and hopefully we can turn things around in the second leg indeed. Paul says, if Arsenal don't show the same ambition as its best players regarding incomings and trophies, why wouldn't they look to find somewhere else? Completely fair question from Paul. Why on earth would any player want to stay at Arsenal if the club they're at don't show that ambition to go out and add the best talent so they've got the best possible chance of winning trophies? Completely fair question. Not one for me to answer. It's one for the club to answer. Matt says, Tom, what does a 10 out of 10 window look like to me? It's a good question. It's not specific names for me. It's adding that striker, that in capital letters. It's adding a wide forward. It's adding Zubimendi, of course. It is adding another midfielder if Partey leaves or keeping Partey. It is potentially another attacking option. If a 9 out of 10 window would be like that, that's kind of the luxury addition for me, is that attacking option, because I'm not sure whether or not Max Dowman can have a huge impact next season. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with Ethan Winneri and his development. So the luxury option to go from a 9 to the 10, is that attacking midfield option, if you like, to give Ødegaard competition. So we don't know if we've already got those players in-house yet. We'll have to wait and see. So a defender, without a doubt, because we're losing Tierney. We could be losing Zinchenko. We could be losing Kivior. Who knows? So I think a defender is going to be important. Calafiori, Tomiyasu, their injury records are, unreliable. A defender and a backup goalkeeper, and a proper permanent backup goalkeeper. That's what we're looking at, for a 10 out of 10 window. That's my expectation. I want to see at least 2 attacking additions, and I mean starting quality attacking additions. A midfielder, maybe 2 if Partey leaves. A defender, a good defender, a competitive defender, not just a cover defender. And, of course, a backup goalkeeper. That for me, is what we need to look at in those positions. So, and that wide forward, of course, can be a player that can play in multiple positions. You're not going to sign a right winger of high caliber because you have Bukayo Saka. It's next to impossible to be able to do that. But you need to find somebody who's got that versatility that if we are missing Saka, that you could cover off. So, I'm a big fan of Mohamed Kudus, for example. Somebody like that in terms of their versatility and what they can offer to the team. Brian Mbeumo, you could arguably argue that he could do that, but he may want to get more guarantees as well about game time, and he doesn't necessarily start for us if indeed he was to join the club. He could do, but he doesn't necessarily sign for us, which is a bit of a problem. I like Kudus, but he's not had a particularly great season this year. But West Ham themselves haven't had a great season, so there's probably some context with that. But he's had 1 goal in the league since December, Kudus, which is not great. 1 assist since December as well. Kudus has not been particularly good this season, but I think maybe there's some context around West Ham more than there is the individual. But it could be a bit of a risk if anyone wants to go and pay big money for the Ghanaian international. Paul says a perfect summer window sees incomings who raise the floor and ceiling, and outgoings who bring in decent money or save big money. I guess that's if you want to include outgoings, then that's a concept. I'm kind of just talking about 10 out of 10s with incoming deals. Outgoing deals I'm kind of looking at separately. I'm looking at the incomings only at the moment. I can't even have the brain power to think about outgoings as well. Carl says, Tom, as you don't give any 10s ever, are we doomed? Very possibly, Claire. Carl, sorry. Very possibly. Claire says, considering outgoings, how many players do you think we will need to sign? More than 4. Yeah, more than 4. I'm looking for more than 4 additions this summer. I think it has to be absolutely, without a doubt, more than 4 players coming in. Stu says, morning, Tom. Not Arsenal, but if Chelsea and one of Man United or Spurs with both cups, Chelsea finish outside the top 5, what are the implications of how many English teams all being in European competition? So, if Chelsea win the Conference League, they get Europa League football. So, if they finish outside the top 5, they probably would have got that anyway. So, I don't think Chelsea factor into this at all. Man United and Spurs, of course, can go into the Champions League if one of them wins the Europa League, which is a stupid rule. But the way in which the Europa League has changed so that the winner gets Champions League football, but no Champions League teams drop into that competition, makes it incredibly easy for the English team to dominate now. I expect domination in the Europa League by English clubs. I really do. I don't think there's much excuse at all. The best clubs in that tournament now are Athletic Club, who are the 4th best side in Spain right now. And you've got Bodo Glimt, in the semi-finals of that competition. That's the reality of the Europa League now. And I think English teams will dominate that. I think that's why it's a really, for teams, like Nottingham Forest, for teams like Aston Villa, it's a great opportunity to win a European trophy, the Europa League now, especially for English clubs because of that reality, So certainly Champions League qualification through that tournament is Well, it just seems a little bit. Well, it's a massive, massive boost. It's a bit OP, you might describe it as. But yeah, so you got Crystal Palace could win the FA Cup. Man City are already inside the top 5, so if they win that, it would change that to a Europa League spot in 6th or 7th spot. And of course, if Chelsea win the Conference League, that has no bearing at all. Newcastle have won the League Cup, so they're already in the Conference League, but they're going to finish inside the top 5, so that doesn't matter. The scenario is that we could have 6 Champions League clubs, the top 5 plus one of Man United or Spurs. So there could be 6 teams in the Champions League next season. The team that finishes 6th in this league is will get a Europa League qualification spot. And if Man City win the FA Cup, then the second Europa League spot will go to 7th. So whoever finishes 7th will also be in the Europa League as well, meaning that the 8th place spot will be a UEFA Conference League place, as well as Newcastle, I think, going into that tournament as well. So, sorry, only if Newcastle finished outside, but they won't. So it will be that 8th place. So top 5 Champions League, one of Spurs or Man United most likely getting the other Champions League spot. 6th place Europa League. 7th place, I think, will be Europa League as well, unless Crystal Palace win the FA Cup. Then, of course, it will be for them. In which case, 7th place will become a Conference League spot. And then 8th place will become a Conference League spot if Man City win the FA Cup. Then Bournemouth or Brentford will be getting, or Brighton or Fulham will be getting that team, or Aston Villa. Who knows? Maybe. It'll be unlikely, but I think it'll be one of Bournemouth, Brentford, or Brighton if Man City win the FA Cup, of course. So still chance to get into that UEFA Conference League. There's no max of countries now since the rule changes, so it's very, very complicated. Alex says, Tom, do you think Berta has been left with too much to do in one window, selling the fringe players and replacing with quality and adding additional depth? We feel we should have started that last window. I mean, we did do that, Alex, last window. You know, think about the players that did leave during Arsenal's last window. We did a lot of selling. In fact, we did the most selling we've done in an incredibly long time at Arsenal last summer. So it's not about being left with too much to do. I think it's just the expectations around this window, to be honest. You know, we sold Smith Rowe, we sold Nketiah, we sold Ramsdale, El Neni left, Okonkwo left, put a lot of players on loan that have obligations or options to buy. You know, Tavares will be leaving as well. He'll be sold because there's an obligation to buy. Lokonga may not be, but he'll be sold, of course, this summer. Carl Hein will probably be sold this summer. Nelson's got a future. He needs to be sold. Plus, it's not just Andrea Berta. You know, Jason Ato is still here. James Ellis, I think, for the moment, is still here. And certainly there's been no suggestions that he's leaving that are concrete. I know there were some rumours that he could leave, but I heard those reports were rubbish. So, I think there's still a lot of people to do a lot of the work, not just Andrea Berta, of course. There's the loan, the people that are in charge of the loans as well. So there's a lot of people behind the scenes. It's not just Berta in charge of all of that stuff. Ashley says, Odegaard is out of form with attacking and passing as captain. Can you at least cover Saka defensive burden with Mendes? Needs Saka to have such energy to save us in attack and track back. It's hard, isn't it? You know, I don't know how we're going to approach this game. I've never been less sure about what to expect. I think we'll be better than we were in the first leg, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll win because PSG could be better as well. I'm expecting us to be a better team. I want to see more control. I want to see more domination, particularly in the first 5 to 10 minutes. I really want to see Arsenal get on the ball, take the sting out of the immediate noise and vociferousness, if you like, of the crowd. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere. It's a very hostile stadium. It's a hostile city. For those traveling, please be careful. If you are going and you're wearing your colours, I recommend covering up probably until you're inside the stadium. It's a difficult stadium to get into. There's a number of checkpoints, I'm told, to get into the ground. So if you're going, please be careful. Please stay safe. It's not. I imagine you'll get stories coming out afterwards of things that have happened just because I can just see it. You know, I can just see it. It's a very, very hostile environment. So it's one to think about, and just please be safe. Benny says, what do you think about the YouTube video by Goal90 saying most of the strikers coming out of the Portuguese league turn out to be duds like Nunez, Jackson Martinez, Carlos Vinicius? I mean, every player is their own individual. Are there trends of players that come out of those leagues that don't tend to do too well? Yes. Does that mean that every single player that comes out of the league is going to be bad? No, of course not. And I think that it's worth pointing that out. It's not always every single striker that comes out of that league or every single player that comes out of that league is bad. And of course, you have to make a judgment that Gyökeres has played in England already. He's already played in the Championship, a very competitive league. He did so at a younger age, and he scored a lot of goals. And he took that experience, he took that ability to Portugal, and he scored double the amount of goals and some. If he comes to Arsenal, I sincerely hope that he proves everything wrong. And I hope that they have done their due diligence. We have not seen a player in Portugal really score this number of goals. The volume of goals that he is scoring for Sporting is different to those ones that you've listed there. So maybe that will come into contention, but who knows? And Cristiano Ronaldo is obviously, yes, the exception, but you are struggling to find others. But there are some success stories. Some have gone through other clubs first before getting to England and succeeding, like a Diogo Jota or like a Bernardo Silva, who have gone to Spain or to France first and then into England. But there are Portuguese players that, of course, have done very, very well playing in England, but players that have moved from the Portuguese league as well, but have gone through other pathways before having that success. So I get it. I know how people highlight it, but it's not something I think to hang your hat on as an ultimatum in deciding a player. Julian, keep it tight till half-time and then look to score again. Remember Anfield 89. There is a real Anfield 89 feeling about this game. A very Anfield 89 feeling about this game. But let's just hope that Arsenal get the job done. Paul says, PSG always come out hard for the first half hour. If we can keep them quiet for 30 minutes, we stand a chance, if only a slim one. A. Rosen says, Gyökeres scores 50 goals in a season. If he comes to England, scores even half of that, it could still be a top performance. Claire said, have you seen that Paris FC have been promoted to Liga and how close their stadium? Yeah, they're next door to each other, those two clubs. I don't know if it was a case of that was PSG's old stadium and then they moved to the Parc des Princes and Paris FC took over. I don't know, but it's a great story. And I'd be interested to see how they get on. I remember back in the day when I did old like Football Manager or career mode streams, I used to always do Paris FC and see if I could turn them into the best club in France. That was always the team that I'd go and pick. But it's doing it themselves now. Very impressive. Noah says, Saliba deserves the move. We don't win anything, but I'd prefer him to leave next summer. Julian says, I also don't think it's the end of the world if PSG score first. We're going to need to score 2 anyway to win. If not, of course, on penalties. It's worth pointing out Arsenal only need to score 1 to go through in this tie. It would require a penalty shootout victory, but they only do need to score once, technically, to go through. Ranted says, have you seen Schalke trolling Arsenal? Yes, I have. I mean, when you go down to the second tier of German football, you tend to have to rely on a little bit of football banter to enjoy yourselves, but fair play to him. Raj says, once we win, do a call-in. Please, have some optimism. Raj, you don't come onto our phone-ins. Why do you always ask for them? If we won the Champions League, no doubt we'd have a phone in. I hope we'd have a lot of people phoning in to apologise, to be honest. But, you can't always guarantee that does go down. Irving says, I'm mystified why we would want to spend good money on Rodrygo. If we can't get Williams, then surely someone like a Semenyo or Atalanta's winger, that's, of course, Lookman, Ademola Lookman, should be on the radar as well. I've banged the drum of Lookman quite a bit on the channel in the past, as you very well know. He's not having the most kind of like happy time with Atalanta. He's had fallings out with the manager, not because of his fault, but mainly because of what the manager, Gasperini, has been saying. He's got 14 goals and 5 assists across 29 Serie A appearances this season. Form in the last 2 months has not been amazing. He started the season very much like he ended the previous season. Of course, he did score in the Champions League game against Club Brugge, but it wasn't enough to help them go through. They did lose both of those games against Club Brugge, Atalanta in their season. In the end, there was some signals that they could indeed potentially have found themselves in, a title race. And while they are third, Napoli lead the way on 77, Atalanta in third on 68. So they are not in that race anymore. By the way, fair play to Napoli. I mean, incredible, really, what they're doing, considering they lost Victor Osimhen in the summer. Of course, had a brilliant campaign when they last won the league. And now with Antonio Conte, you've got to rate Antonio Conte. What a manager. Doing fantastic things once again and winning titles potentially in Serie A with Napoli. Brilliant achievement if they can go on to do that. Ian says Matoma could be a good signing. I wouldn't be against the idea of that. The problem with that, of course, is at the moment that, well, he's at Brighton, which means they usually are going to have to pay huge money to be able to go and do that. So, yeah, it's very difficult to see that happening. But I wouldn't say no to Matoma. I do very much rate Matoma indeed. Nikkei says, if Nottingham won't make it to the Champions League, could Arsenal approach some of their attacking players? Of course, Alanga, Hudson-Odoi have done very well this season, so has Morgan Gibbs-White. But is that something that is that what we would want? Are there players that we think would take Arsenal to the title? Matoma's 27 now, I guess, and that's being pointed out by Paul. Does that change how we view Matoma as a potential sign? You could argue that he's still got a good 5 seasons, though, in him, at least, as a winger. We signed Trossard, at 29? And we've got some good returns out of him. But is Matoma a guy that takes you to that next level? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if the investment or if the amount of money it would take to do that. And he says, what about Chris Wood winning us the league? I mean, what a season Chris Wood has had. He's had the twilight years of his career. Absolutely brilliant. He's 33 years of age. He makes my team of the season for the Premier League for sure. 19 Premier League goals in 32 matches for Nottingham Forest. Absolutely brilliant. What a season. What a season he has had. Daniel says, Tom, I'm not super familiar with Zubimendi. What qualities do you think he would bring if he comes in for Partey next season? I mean, there's no guarantee Partey goes now at this stage, But Zubimendi is far more of a progressor. Is a more, Spanish Pavotti, if you like, the passer of the ball, the controller of the ball. Is really good at getting the ball into good positions, of course, a good transition player. Good defensively, it's worth pointing out as well. Maybe not as strong as Partey's defensively, but still very good defensively. Across the board, just looking at his FBref stats now, 72nd percentile for interceptions, 73rd percentile for blocks, 95th percentile for clearances, 85th for aerial duels, 1. So that's playing for Real Sociedad in Spain, as opposed to playing, of course, for Arsenal in the Premier League. So there are differences there. If you want to know what Partey's are, for instance, just do a quick comparison defensively. Zubimendi 1.24 interceptions per 90, Partey 1.16. Zubimendi 1.41 blocks per 90, Partey 1.01. Clearances per 90, 2.78. Partey 1.58. Where Partey does, of course, come through is the tackling, 2.49 per 90 to Zubimendi's 2.19. So a difference of 0.3 per 90, but still very close. And then aerial duels, rather interestingly, despite Partey's height, 0.9 per 90. Zubimendi 1.66 per 90 when it comes to kind of those as well. And Zubimendi does like to go forwards. Partey attaches in the attacking penalty area, 1.11 per 90. Zubimendi 1.63. That is rather impressive. Progressive passes, Partey 5.68. Zubimendi 5.51. But think about the context. Think about how much Partey dominate with Arsenal games. The fact that Zubimendi is still putting in those passing numbers for a less dominant team in La Real is very impressive indeed. Jerome says Arsenal need more quality, not straight replacements. The squad needs to be bigger. I definitely agree. Robert says, how can people say sack Arteta if he doesn't win the Champions League? But if he does, build him a statue. 2 games make drastically different extremes. I know. I don't subscribe to that. I think it denigrates. I think that opinion denigrates the Champions League. It denigrates that achievement. It makes it sound like the Champions League is the only thing that could save Arteta's job, despite finishing where we might finish this season. Of course, in the league, 2 cup semi-finals. I find it a very odd one. It's a very odd opinion. I know many people hold it. I know many friends of mine hold it, but I find it a very, very odd opinion. I don't think it's justifiable based upon this particular season or even the last few seasons. I don't think it's justifiable. Chano says, Tom, the transfer window will return next month, right? If I'm not mistaken, the transfer window show opens on June. Do you expect it to go hard? The transfer show will open, of course, as soon as the season is finished, my friend. As soon as the season is done, the day after, of course, the season is done, the transfer window starts on this show. The transfer shows will start. However, as I've mentioned before, I am taking a break in June for a holiday. I've been doing this show for 3 years non-stop. I need to take a week or two off. So when I'm away in Canada in June for a holiday, I will be taking a break. I'm in Canada anyway, so it's not like I'm going to be jumping up at 2 a.m. to do shows for you, even the time difference. So there will be, if anything big happens, you can be sure that I will be dropping a show to talk about it, but I will be taking a holiday then. But yes, the transfer show will be starting as soon as the day after Arsenal's, or the day after the season finishes. We'll be doing a show, of course, the day after the final game of Arsenal's season. And then the day after that will be the first transfer show of the summer. But then there will be a break for a week or two in June while I'm away on holiday. And then we will come back strong for the rest of the transfer window and, of course, the rest of the pre-season and all of that as well. So plenty still to be excited about going forwards. But it'd be good to take a break, have some lines, people, and then come back, of course, to help support the channel when we get going again. I understand that, interrupting your flow, interrupting uploading, scheduling, it can have a big impact on channels. Trust me, I'm taking a big hit to my job by doing this, but it is an absolute necessity in order to just refresh and go again. And I hope that you will come back as soon as we are indeed back from our holidays. Paul says, Arteta won't be sacked, as the club must know they didn't buy players in January. Oh, yeah, there's no way the club do let him go. It's just, there's no way that's going to happen. If Arsenal don't win the Champions League this season, he will be at the club next season. There is no doubt in my mind about that. I wouldn't be shocked. There's like a 1% chance that he goes if Arsenal weren't to win the Champions League. And I think it would be his decision and not the club's as well. MJ says, where do you think we'll finish? I think probably third in the end, maybe fourth, because obviously Chelsea and Newcastle play each other. So that could take points off one another. It depends on what Arsenal do. It's in Arsenal's hands where they finish. If we win our 3 games, great. If we win 2 of our 3 games, we get second. That's how it works, because our goal difference is superior to that of Newcastle and Man City. If we win 2 of our 3 games, Arsenal will finish second, but that includes beating one of Newcastle and Liverpool, and of course on top of that, Southampton. So yeah, let's wait and see what goes down. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your evening. Tomorrow morning, you will be getting a show while I am on the Eurostar on the way to Paris. I'll be joined by a special guest to talk about all of the things from the weekend, and of course looking ahead to the match against PSG, and of course a lot of chat about transfers as well. So look out for that. That's tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. UK time, and then of course you'll hear from me on Wednesday morning from Paris ahead of that massive game against PSG that Arsenal of course do have. But yes, do join us tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. for a premiere of that show with one of our favourite friends of the podcast. See you soon. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy, respectful, and as always, up the Arsenal.